dun. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for today, April 26, 2022. As always, I'm Tom's Hardware Editor-in-Chief, Avram Pilch, and I'm joined by Associate Editor Les Pounder, Raspberry Pi expert Ash Hill, and our very special guest, Sean Tracey. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean. Are you looking for somebody else?
No, thanks for having me. It's a real delight to be here and talk about some fun, interesting stuff, and to be in such good company as well. So I can't think of a better place to spend my evening. I think your afternoon and morning. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So can you tell folks a little bit about yourself and some of the projects you do? I mean, we in particular want to talk about your Glowie Bowie, but you do a lot of fantastic projects.
Yeah, so I'm Sean. I'm a free-range technologist, which means right now I'm just going about doing my own sort of thing and making projects I find interesting and fun, and hoping to show those off to people and get them interested in it too. And over the years, I made a long list of strange and weird and sometimes clever, but not often clever things. From a beer brewing kit that could read your mind and pour you a pint of beer if you wanted one, to UV sensors that plug straight into the headphone jack of your phone, the statues that could sing, to today's Glowie Bowie. Not all of them have caught fire over the years, but some of them have. And, we all learn through trials and tribulations, right? So the fact that this one is 90% cardboard does worry me, but it has been 1,326 days since my last incident, and I want to keep that record up. When that counter goes back to zero, you're like, oh, so much work out the window. So yeah.
So Les, you have some really good quality pictures of Glowie Bowie. Maybe Sean can kind of describe what it does and what powers it.
Yeah. So Glowie Bowie is my most recent interesting IoT project, and I live in Brixton, which is the birthplace of David Bowie. And when my flatmate and I moved in, we're like, we should do something interesting and arty with to put on the walls and whatnot. And I had these kind of NeoPix LEDs lying around, and of course a Raspberry Pi. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could have something that would react to like the environment or to things that we do? And one of the things I always love to put into projects is weather. I love the weather because it's always the same in England and unpredictable until it's not, and then you're in trouble. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to be able to put together a bit of pop art and hook that up to a weather system so that we can look at it and see whether or not we're going to need cold or hot clothes going out. Because it may be lovely in the morning, but as soon as you step out the door, it's going to change clothes. So I put together this Glowie Bowie. And so you can see in some of these images here that there's a very clear divide in colors. So the left-hand side of the top left half of the poster is the temperature outside. And the right-hand side is the kind of conditions we've got. So this one particularly is really, really hot and really, really clear. That was the demo because I thought the colors looked great. But and of course, as you can see, one of the pictures, I made this in the middle of the night because as is one of my habits, if I'm going to make something, I will often book an event to talk about it to force me to make it in time. So this was made a bit down to the wire. But yeah, it was that's what it does, and that's how it works. And it's still on my wall. It still hasn't caught fire, and we're 6 months into it now, so I think we're out of the danger zone. And yeah, that's pretty much what it does. And the awesome. Rainbow is nothing but show off the fact that it has LEDs in it. It looks pretty cool. So yeah.
That is nice. Also, you've got a Raspberry Pi 4 powering it, but you're not using the Raspberry Pi 4 to get the weather data, are you?
No. So one of the things I like to do with IoT devices is I like to be able to configure them remotely and have them respond to whatever input I want without having to reprogram them. So I've got my Raspberry Pi on my network, and that's easy enough to get into and change as I like. But I'm not always in my flat. I'm not in my flat right now. I'm somewhere else in the UK and traveling around. And I like to be able to configure these systems without having to reprogram or redeploy code or set up those kind of pipelines. So I wrote it so it would hook into AWS's IoT platform. So a little bit about me in the past. I recently just left AWS as one of the senior developer advocates to go free roaming. So of course I baked that into it because it's my favorite cloud platform. And what that meant was I could use AWS's IoT MQTT broker, which gets built into the servers in the platform, to distribute messages to any kind of device, but also accept them wherever I wanted to. And in this case, when it comes to the weather, I have a Lambda function fire up every 10 minutes, check the weather for my flat, and then post that to the MQTT broker, which then gets sent on to the Raspberry Pi, which is subscribed to that broker to react accordingly. So the Pi decides what the colors of the poster should be based on the data it receives, but the data itself is sent intermittently by this lovely little service function. The reason I did that is I have dozens of projects, lots and lots of servers running across the internet in many different cloud platforms. That gets expensive after a little while, $2 or $3 here or there, time to buy a couple dozen. There's a lot each month. So it's like, well, if I use the IoT platform and I use Lambda, you're only getting billed for the time that function is running for, which is milliseconds. It's a HTTP request, and then an MQTT subscription to post this message off to it. So it'll shoot on off, do its thing, and then shut down again. So it actually costs me nothing to run, which is nice. The cost of the Pi, the printing service I use to have them make the poster, and the LEDs itself, most of which I had lying about my flat anyway. I've got a vast array of little computers and SPs and Raspberry Pis sitting about waiting for me to cause trouble with them. So yeah, it's a nice way of building a system which doesn't cost me much to run except the electricity bill. And I can still influence without having to get into the guts of the system to change things.
Can you explain a little bit more about the hardware that constructs it? Because I know you said it's got a lot of cardboard in it, and you just mentioned that there's a custom poster printed on the front. I didn't realize that. That's pretty cool. So what goes into making it?
So originally, we were just going to use one of the cover from Aladdin Sane. My housemate and I are big Bowie fans. It's not the reason we moved to Brixton, but it's definitely a plus. And we love the cover of the Aladdin Sane album. And it is with the lightning bolt's face. And I had that kind of design, put it in Photoshop, did some things with it. And it didn't look very, very good in what I'd done to make it a bit more pop arty and try and emphasize the lightning bolt. So I decided to abstract it further and just do the lightning bolt. Had that sent off to a printing company. They sent me a couple back. And instead of just putting the poster in the frame, if the NeoPixel LEDs are really, really bright. Really bright. It's surprising how much they can shine through even a layer of quite thick poster paper. And if you look at some of the images there, you can see the point where they are because they're closer to the front of the picture than they are than some others are. Mm-hmm. So I had to take one of the posters, use it as a template to cut out the same image in cardboard to create a block so that only light would shine through where the illuminated sections were. And then I mounted the NeoPixel LEDs to another bit of cardboard behind it and kind of sandwiched the poster between the frame at the front, a piece of cardboard with the lightning-shaped hole in the back of it, the LEDs that have been mounted to some cardboard behind that, and stacked them with 4 little cardboard, if you think of the legs of your bed underneath, it's basically those little pegs that hold them together, and then glued the whole thing together. And then re-glued it all together, but it did fall off the wall at one point after I finished building it. It's like, oh, it works! Oh, it needs more glue. And many things you can fix with more glue. Duct tape, glue, 90% of jobs can be dealt with these 2 vital components. So I would recommend everyone invest heavily in them. And then, the Pi sits to the side of it, and I haven't got around to mounting it yet. So it was just kind of hanging on by the tensile strength of the wires and the GPIO pins. Not the best thing in the world, Given that the power pack's quite heavy, I'm actually amazed it's held on for as long as it has. But it's a little power pack that I got from a popular product website, which delivers power for both the Pi and the NeoPixel LEDs. Yeah. And it means that I can just plug in one plug at one place rather than have to do multiple wires and multiple plugs. My flat doesn't have many plug sockets. Common problem when you're living in London. And hook it into the GPIO pin number 6, I think it was, and of course you can use that to feed data out through a Python script. So there's a Python script on the Pi which ascribes to the MQTT broker I have running in AWS, and it also drives the pixels in that software. So it receives the event. It says, we have a weather update. The weather is different. What color should these pixels be? And it will then fire off and make that happen. Or if I so choose, I can go onto the broker with my laptop and make it do rainbow colors. So every now and then my flatmate will be sitting in London. The room will start glowing all these wonderful array of colors. He's like, why is that happening? I pushed the button. He's like, okay, I didn't know you had a button. Of course I had a button. I always have. There's always a button for these things. But and so again, one of the nice things being able to have something living in a cloud platform somewhere. It's accessible from all over the world, with appropriate security. I don't want anyone just deploying rainbows on my living room wall, although there are worse things that people could do. So, yeah.
So I take it it's not publicly invisible then, it's just all private.
Again, one of the nice things about having a cloud platform, I'm gonna do the old company line here, but security is day one at Amazon. So everything you build has to be secure, from prototype through to product. And of course, that means that when it comes to connecting to an MQTT broker, there is no insecure connection. It's HTTPS or SSL certificates to connect to the thing. So my Pi has this, my Lambda function has an IAM, which gives it access to that broker, to their IoT platform to deploy that message. And so from end to end, it's a secure system. The least secure thing about it are my Raspberry Pi credentials. So if someone's on my network, they can probably brute force it fairly easily. But it's not the default password, which I know they're removing now, but it's still not, the most brute forceable free thing in the world. But from getting the weather through to getting that information into the Pi, that is end-to-end secure. And they say that the S in IoT stands for security, but in this case, it is a secure IoT product, which is quite nice. It's also one of the joys of using actually handle the SSL certificates without, I tried to build it with an SP, and this is really hard to flash these certificates to a microcontroller. Let's kick it up a notch and use the extra power of a fully fledged Linux operating system to get this done for me. So yeah, I can't complain at all. Really easy to do.
Do you have to pay for the SSL certificate?
No, it's a self-signed certificate that's generated by Amazon. So, it has the A to B. Amazon has the authority, and they go, yep, okay, here you go, have at it. And I just get those, and I can just put them on a device, and that manages the connection. My credentials are connected to the devices, which is good fun.
So this is a very impressive project. What are some of the other great projects that you've done in the past?
My favorite one, ever, is does everyone know the Lionel Richie song "Hello"? Hello, is it me you're looking for?
I'm old enough to remember when it came out.
Remember the video that came up with it?
Yeah, sure. She was making the head where she's sculpting his head.
So I was working in sunny Bournemouth at the time on the south coast of the UK. We made that statue as best as we could. We're not clay modelers. My boss actually went and made a pretty good attempt. The first attempt was awful. The second attempt was much better. But we were thinking at the time about ambient computing. How this is 2012, 2013. We're thinking eventually computers will listen to you. They'll predict what you want to do with something and then start lining up stuff for you. You can even respond to queries you make of it, which doesn't seem revolutionary these days because I have several Echo and Google Home devices around my house. But this is 2013. Those weren't really about yet. So we made this Lionel Richie statue with a Raspberry Pi that when you said hello anywhere in the room, it would sing back, "Is it me you're looking for?" And so every now and then, we put it in a corridor. People were like, "Oh, hello there. Is it me you're looking for?" The original idea was to use a Pi to hook it into the office phone system. So when someone picked up the phone, they would hear, "Is it me you're looking for?" But our CEO told us if we did that, we'd be out on our backsides. So we're like, okay, let's make this a little bit more. Isolated, but still very publicly accessible, right? And so we made this kind of very simple V1 or even beta kind of voice assistant in the form of Lionel Richie years before these other kind of mainstream sort of things came to market. And it's actually led me to a lot of work at different companies working with natural user interfaces, the IoT, and speech to text. So that was the main thread through my career for 7 years. And it was just a daft thing that my boss came up with on a train, and those are the best ideas you have. The ones that I think that, it's a little bit silly. It's a little bit is that even possible right now with what we've got? And then you go out and you find the tools, you try and make that happen. And, then you have this absolutely mad thing. And everyone's like, tell me more about that. It's funny, but I want to know how that works. And so that's my top shelf favorite project we did.
Did the eyes light up or anything?
No, missed opportunity there, I think. We tried to avoid using too many lasers and LEDs because I'm not joking. A bunch of my projects did catch fire. And again, when you're a 22-something, amateur hardware engineer, you're not quite understanding the power ratings on things. You're not quite understanding how much energy actually goes into a stepper motor if you wanted to move at a particular speed. And sometimes that stuff feeds back, and sometimes things explode. The fire brigade were only called once, and that was the bad one. But other than that, it's just oh God, get it out, And again, it's been a long time since I had them, but it's been good fun. And I do kind of miss. We called him ambient Lionel. I wish I had a miniature version now. To probably 3D print
What did you What did you use for speech recognition for it?
So Google had at the time Google's speech to text API was open and free. So we streamed a lot of data to that cloud network just from a corridor in the office, which in retrospect not the most secure thing. We essentially bugged the corridor and fed it into Google. But it was the only like API at that time that was available that would give us back reliable results. We tried to run the transcription on the device itself, but this is a first version Model B Raspberry Pi, so it could do it, but it would take 40 seconds. So a person would say hello, they'd walk away, and then into the abyss, Lionel would go, "Is it me you're looking for?" And if a tree falls on wood, no one hears it. Did it even happen? So it's that kind of problem there. So we're like, okay, once again, and there's a bit of a theme in this, the power of the cloud can help us. And we found this API. It was very easy to use at the time. We're like, okay, let's shoot that off and see what we come back with. And again, 9 times out of 10, it worked a charm. If it didn't, when we were doing a demo, I could just hit a button and it would just say the words. And again, there's always a button. The buttons are what make life fun.
No question about it. I think next week our guest is going to have some heads that are moving and have RGB lights in them, but I don't think that they are Lionel Richie themed. So,
the damnedest thing was the next year, the Isle of Wight Festival was a huge music festival. Yeah, that they ran in the UK. They had a giant Lionel Richie head that you could walk into of that clay model, and then pick up a phone and listen to him think, "Is it me you're looking for?"
I didn't realize people cared that much.
This is the thing. Oh, mate, he's a national treasure, but
I guess more in the UK than here.
Possibly, quite possibly. We are a very loyal fan base, so it would seem 40 years later we're still doing these kind of things.
People watch Lionel Richie on. I think he's on American. Is he American Idol or America's Got Talent? One of those shows that they have here, those talent shows, and they watch him there. But I didn't realize people were that into the head from a 40-year-old video.
This is how you keep relevant in the social media age, by taking your head and turning it into an IoT product that can, shout at people. I think it's in a way it's kind of a form of immortality, and Lionel Richie will live forever with a Raspberry Pi inside his brain.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can wonder what other Raspberry Pi projects one could make based on 1980s videos. Could you have something where you hit play on YouTube and it actually slaughters a radio star or something? I don't know.
Well, we've got Les had that camera filter that made everything look like outlines. We could do the Take on Me from
like can you just make everything look like Take on Me?
Yeah. You could start running through doors and tripping over things while people in biker gear chase you around the building. This is not what I imagined it would be, but it could be good.
I mean, maybe some type of touch device where if you touch it too hard, it starts to sing, "Do you really want to hurt me?" I mean.
Oh, we did have one. We were going to make a hammer that was hooked up to an electrical circuit. It said, "Don't touch this," or "Can't touch this beneath it." If you did touch it, it would shock you. But again, help shut that one down. Because it's true, you can't touch this. But such is life.
It's not recommended.
Maybe I will still make it. I just need a hammer, some electrical clips, and an engraving machine. Give me 20 minutes. Excuse me.
There you go. So,
but this is the thing, So go on, Everett.
Oh, sorry. That's really cool. So speaking of cool things you can do with Raspberry Pi boards, Les, you have a bunch of new boards that I don't think most of us have seen.
I do indeed. Yes, I've been trawling AliExpress recently for different RP2040 boards, and I found quite a lot. So these are the ones that don't come up to the top. They're not really the highlights of the boards that you see everywhere. These are the ones that sort of you can get really cheap and you don't really know much about them. So I've got a plethora of boards here. That's the word of the day. So you can see there's the common boards that we all know and love. I've got a Sense hat as well for a bit later on. But we've got Pi Square, the new one from SB Components, which can connect a Raspberry Pi running as a server with a hat on top of the board. And you can control and work with data from that hat over Wi-Fi, because it's got a built-in ESP8266. Sorry, 8285, I think it is. Sorry.
Ooh.
That is work in progress. So I'm trying to get that to work at the minute. It's a little bit tricky because I'm working with some very new code. but looks like good fun. We've got Stacky Pi, which is a Pi Zero form factor, but it's really an RP 2040 board. That's good fun. But then it's the weird and wonderful ones. So I'm going to bring in ones that we know. So we know Pico Lipo, Pimoroni's board, one of the early boards that had a greater amount of RAM storage. And it also had on board LiPo charging and Stemma QT quick connections. And thought, yeah, that's great. But then I was on AliExpress and I found something very similar. So this is the similar board here. This was about £8, so about $10 to $12 US, something like that. It identifies as a Pico LiPo for some reason. It's using that firmware, but it hasn't got LiPo charging. But it is considerably cheaper. So I picked that up to have a play with. It's also got an incredibly thick PCB for the size of it. And I'm talking, watch me break it live on camera. It's incredibly thick. And I thought this could be interesting for us to play around with, but it is an RP 2040 from a third party. Then we've got other ones from Lily Go. This has got an OLED screen on it. I can't plug it in to show it, unfortunately, but it has an OLED screen on it that shows, well, full color images. Really crisp images on this. Great fun.
2 buttons on the front there.
2 buttons, well spotted. There's also one on the side as well, just there.
Ooh.
So we've got boot, we've got reset, and on the side is a run button. So that'll be mapped to some GPIO pin there. Another one from SB Components, and this is a round screen RP2040, so it's just a round OLED screen. It's got built-in storage, it's got a micro SD card. I can't see any flash on it, so there might be a small amount of flash on it, or it might be just that you have to use micro SD for storage. But unusual form factor.
How does that compare to? There's a breakout garden screen like that from Pimoroni. How does it compare to that?
Very similar screen. I'd be surprised if it wasn't the same screen, to be fair. This screen has been used by Pimoroni, and SB Components has got it on a Raspberry Pi breakout board as well. So that's new. That was a Kickstarter about 6 weeks ago, that one. But what I'm interested in the most is it looks like this. So there's a feather, the RP2040 feather from Adafruit. This is gold standard of Pico boards. Onboard charging, feather form factor, USB-C, which is always good to have. Yeah, you sacrifice some pins, but come on. You don't need all the GPIO pins, do you? So I picked that up ages ago. That was over a year ago. But then I picked this up the other day. This is a Challenger 2040. You'll notice, that's why I've got the feather out to start with. Identical form factor, even identical charging. NeoPixels. But what's different about this? Wi-Fi built into it. No messing around with SPI wires, which we did with this, with a breakout board. I remember hacking that together for a Pico project very early on when the Pico came out. All in one. So if I've got a feather wing, something like that, so something for the RGB matrix or just for extra sensors, plug it straight in, get the Wi-Fi running, and I've got a tiny data collection device ready to go. This was about £15, so I'm guessing about $20, something like that, which isn't a lot of money when you consider how small it is and what functionality you're getting. And yeah, LiPo charging.
Wow. So what type of Wi-Fi is it? What type of Wi-Fi chip is it?
I think it's the 8285 again. Let's just do a double check. It is 8285. I had to take my glasses off to see that. So yeah, again, ESP8285 Wi-Fi. It's got 1 meg onboard storage for the ESP. And I think it's got, I'm reading the back now, I think it's got about 8 meg of storage on this as well.
So does it also support Bluetooth?
That is untested. If it's an 8285, I think it's just Wi-Fi. I think it was ESP32 that had Bluetooth on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another board I've been buying a load of. I've got a load of clone ESP32 boards at the moment. Some which are the size of my thumbnail and have full Wi-Fi and a 5x5 RGB NeoPixel grid on them. It's tiny. Yeah, £8.
Not bad. That's crazy.
Really, really good fun. But yeah, these are all boards I'm going to be reviewing over the coming weeks and be on Tom's Hardware to have a read. But I am really excited to have a play with this. Because we've covered Challenger's products twice before in our news stream. and they're very interesting.
Yeah, that's great. If you can have full Feather compatibility and you have the Wi-Fi built in, that's really helpful, because wireless is one of those things where we really. I still am waiting though for us to find an RP2040 board that can do consistent Bluetooth pairing, and like stay paired, which I haven't seen yet. We have ones that do Bluetooth, but not via
Yeah.
pairing. So
You still want to make a controller, right?
yes, right, exactly. Make a controller, make a mouse, whatever out of it. And the problem is that you can kind of do a temporary Bluetooth connection, but I haven't seen one where it will maintain a pairing and can be used like a regular peripheral. So speaking of something though that you might want Wi-Fi for, Ash, you're gonna talk about something we can do with our regular Pi.
Yeah, I've been tackling GUIs over the last couple of weeks. I've had interfaces on the mind because they're so useful for pretty much any Raspberry Pi project. And now I've moved on to web servers. And I like the idea of using a web interface to operate Pi projects. And the good news is they're surprisingly easy to set up. So there's tons of options out there. But today I wanted to cover one in particular that I find is one of the easiest to get started with. Also, it's quite popular, so you're going to find a lot of documentation from the community for it. It's called Apache 2. I'm going to switch my screen over to my virtual machine. I'm running the latest Raspberry Pi OS. It's just a little bit easier to set this up for the live stream, but it'll work on an actual Raspberry Pi, of course. So if you want to know a little bit more about this in greater detail, we've got an awesome guide put together by Avram over at Tom's Hardware. It goes over everything that you need to do to set it up and get started as far as hardware, software, all of that. You'll need a Raspberry Pi to get started. And as far as software goes, you'll need to install Apache 2, along with a few other things like PHP and MySQL database tools. I've already got these basics installed. And what I'm going to do is show you what the default website looks like once you have everything installed. So you don't really have to do anything to set this up. This is just bare bones what you get once it's there. You open up a browser, you can go to your host name in the address field. I just put localhost here. If it's running on the Raspberry Pi and you want to access it from that same Pi, you'll need to use localhost in the address field. But if you're on the network and using a separate device, just use the host name for your Raspberry Pi. So whatever you've got it set to, you can change it under Raspberry Pi configuration, and that's going to change what you use to get there. So this is just a default page, but I want to show you guys how easy it is to set up your own. Here we have just a simple HTML page that's going to say Hello PiCast. This is a custom web page. I've got it saved on my desktop, and it's as easy as dragging and dropping to the right folder location. So I'm going to move my test file over here. Let's put the original back just in case I want it. We're going to rename it to index. That's what it's going to recognize as the default page to pull up. Go back to the browser, and I want to refresh. It should have the page that I made. And it's, like I said, it's easy to get to if you're on the same network. It's kind of like a closed setting. So this isn't like something you're going to use to set up a website for people to get to across the full internet. But there are tons of ways that you could use this in projects. You can display data in real time. You can add buttons to work as an input system. Actually, on that note, Avram, didn't you and your son do something similar for a robot project?
Well, sure. We didn't use Apache for that. We used what's that called, Les? Where you use
Flask.
Flask, right? We used Flask, although Flask apparently for some robot projects wasn't really keeping up. So that was an issue. But yeah, we used Flask instead of Apache. I mean, one thing like I do with this a lot is I actually use Apache with a lot is that we have like an internal website that we use for some tool things at work, and that we don't host on a Raspberry Pi. We host it on a hosting service, but I create a local version of it here that I can test in my home, and then also that I can make to do projects. Like one of the things that my tools do is like go out to our website and like do an indexing of the website and track certain things like what pages are linking to whatever. And rather than make our like host that we are paying money for do that and get bogged down, I have the Raspberry Pi do it. So sometimes I might have to index like 10,000 pages or something in a day, I will run the Apache here. I'll connect it to the database to the shared database remotely, but then I'll just have like, maybe this Raspberry Pi here, run it and, just let it go and do, where it maybe is indexing 700, 800 pages an hour, which isn't great, but I can just leave it and, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 hours, it'll be done. So, and unlike a lot of remote hosting services that set a timeout, when you control the Raspberry Pi, you can make sure it never times out and can do a script forever, which is important. I would like to actually, and we'll work on an article on how you could actually host the website globally in your house, because using IP port forwarding, you absolutely could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it recommended? Probably not. But a lot of things, but it's also not recommended that you do a lot of things with Raspberry Pi, but we do them for the fun of it. And so I would like, I'm going to try and figure out how you can actually, there are port forwarding services that you can have that actually do cost a little money, where you can have a real domain on the internet and have it go to a port in your house, on your home network. And I got to figure out how to do that, because I think that would be a cool thing for us to write about. Wow. Thank you, Ash. And thank you so much, Sean. That is all the time we have this week. But I want to thank all of you for listening and watching. We are on here every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. UK time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. And next week we have another special guest who has some really wild-looking heads that he's working on that I don't think say hello, but do look really creepy.
Give him a week, it probably will.
I mean, maybe now that he's seen this, he'll change it.
Collaboration.
But there's time. Anyway, thanks to everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.